First off, we want to welcome in the good doctor today because we've been talking here about the issue. It's not a pleasant one, but it's omnipresent in our society, and that's unfaithfulness in a marriage and what happens and the many travails that couples go through when one has strayed, and maybe more than once. Well, today, the idea of, who will forgive, the forgiving spouse, and that's not an easy thing to do, but it may be required if the marriage is going to stay together. Dr. John Braccio is with Regional Psychological Services, of course, in East Lansing, and the podcaster always at drjohnb.com. Here he is. Good morning, sir. Welcome. I hope you're doing good.
Well, good morning to you. No, I never felt better, Dave. And in terms of this topic, this is our third segment on this in a row. The first segment was, why do people have extramarital affairs? Second one is, what does the person who's been having the affair, what do they have to do to have the marriage come back together? And then the third today, we're talking about how does the betrayed person, how does that person come back from the tremendous hurt and pain that has occurred? And obviously, it's a very, very difficult thing. As a starting point, the betraying spouse really has to show total remorse, total honesty, and a full commitment to the spouse in the marriage. If that's a starting point, which is a critical point, then there are certain things that have to happen. The person who has been betrayed needs to obtain all the facts. The person has to know everything. It sounds kind of hard, but that's true. There'll be questioning, and this is going to go on, but the person, as painful as it is, that's part of the process. Two, there really needs to be ongoing discussion about the person's feelings in the affair, what it did to them, using I feel statements rather than the accusatory, you made me feel statements. The need to engage in active listening, which is where a person just listens and doesn't respond, doesn't challenge, simply tries to listen. And this is where the offending party, if you will, really has to really fully understand how the person feels. Now, also, the person who's done the betraying also has to be part of that, too, in terms of give and take both ways. But that's very critical, that the person vent, get everything out, and the person really realize, how they feel. There's a need for open discussion about the affair, get everything out. Persons have to try to limit the amount of time talking about the affair on a daily basis. It can't just be a 24-hour thing. Both spouses need conversation and activity separate from the affair. Then also expect many soul-searching moments where the emotional pain can return in extreme amounts. And if that happens, the person who has been, cheated on definitely can wonder, can I ever love or trust the person again? This is definitely part of the process. And then if both spouses really want the relationship to work, it's really critical that in order to move forward to save the marriage and occur, that there has to be long and hard discussion, long and hard working things. And the offending person has to realize that the emotional mountains that the offended party must climb to both move forward and fully understand why the extramarital relationship occurred are very difficult. They're difficult to climb, but they must be done. Then the amount of time needed to fully commit to save the marriage varies with the betrayed spouse in terms of what happens. Now, as a positive person, I've worked with many, many couples over the decades where the marriages have been saved, but it's really it's a very hard thing to do, because to overcome a betrayal, which can make the person feel so naked, so betrayed, it does require so much effort, so much on both sides. But if they can do it, both work on overdrive, both do soul searching, often have a spiritual component, can be helpful too, then they can get together, they can have a successful marriage, and they can come back. But it is a lot of work. I'm an optimist, but when the betrayal is that deep, it takes work, it takes time, but if it's done, and you also have to look, by the way, what were some of the issues that may have led to this? What were the problems in the marriage? You also have to take a look at that. So all in all, terrible, difficult process. End result can still be loving and caring and learning from a very horrible experience.
Of those you've worked with, so give me an idea here. You say you're positive, but I mean, is it a 50-50 proposition? Is it a number less than that? You've worked with a lot. You've seen people work through it and make it happen. But are the odds against you when this has occurred in your marriage? By definition, are the odds against you?
I think the odds are really against you because often the affair reflects something much deeper. Problems, lack of respect, lack of a good marriage. If they really want to work on it and really want to love, and each is willing to give 100%, then it can be positive. Often the betraying partner will actually try to put it back on the other person, like, you made me do this. Okay, I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's kind of the way it works. If a person isn't willing to accept that they could have talked about it before, they could have separated, they could have done a lot of things. So I think the odds are clearly against you when there's not a full commitment on both sides, particularly the one who did the offending. Because if there are some situations, once there's an affair, it's over. It doesn't matter. There's going to be no talking. There's going to be nothing. There are others that try so hard to save it that they don't really negotiate enough, and they run the risk of it happening again. Like, they try to believe, but in the back of their mind, they really question it. But there are those that do work together, and working with a few couples that I think that can really happen right now, that I feel they really can be together. It's just a lot of work and a lot of pain. So I think the percentage depends, Dave, on the facts. I mean, it sounds kind of funny, but if the people really are working and it was a horrible thing, then I think, and they want to be together and there's a reason to be together, that's fine. But if the relationship was not that good, this can be the coup de grace. It can be kind of,
the end game. What does society do right now to either exacerbate this, or is our current society, as we've evolved here, year 2020? I mean, I look at, there's websites that advertise, and there's like AshleyMadison.com where they actually use the tagline, "Life is short, have an affair." They call it married dating. I don't know what you would call it as a psychologist, but they call it married dating. And I mean, does society push us now into the category of anything goes, it's okay, and even if you've wronged somebody, you'll have redemption, you'll have grace out of this. Don't worry about forgiveness so much, but society will forgive you. Where does that stand right now in your mind?
I think you're right. I think there's a lot of, one time around, kind of the old 60s statement, that a lot of people just want to do it. And I also think the breakdown in spirituality, okay, meaning someone doesn't have to be a spiritual person, you can have a strong moral code. But I think if a person at least can distinguish between right and wrong, I think a lot of times people can't distinguish between right and wrong. They begin to think, well, whatever I feel like doing, and they can kind of make up their own set of rules. Whereas when there's a sense of spirituality through a church organization, there can be a structure. There can be the Ten Commandments. There can be the two great commandments in the New Testament if you're Christian. But if you break that down, I do think you run a higher risk. Not that everybody that is a practicing religious person is not having affairs or anything. I don't want to say that. I would simply say, if you don't have a strong moral code in terms of a relationship and the sanctity of the two persons and making a lifetime commitment, yes, you're going to have more philandering running around. And I actually seen sometimes that people almost seem not to mind. Let's kind of move on to the next stage, or we'll just stay together and you do this and I do that. It is a crazy world, maybe more so now than in the past, where half marriages fail anyway. So obviously there's a lot of problems in the marital world, if you will. But I think in the society that doesn't really frown that heavily on, there's a lot of, like you say, a lot of encouragement. Go do it.
There is some out there. Doc, do you find any in the forgiving party here, the party that needs to, let's put it this way, as you did, the party that's been wronged and has been offended, whether they forgive or not, that's going to depend on what happens going forward. But do you find there's much difference there in success between the genders? Are men more likely to forgive a transgression, or women traditionally more likely to forgive and move on and try to patch it up?
Well, I think it really depends. And, at the risk of sounding gender not aware, I find that men are generally, as a general rule, not as emotionally involved. I found over time that if a woman's having an affair, often the relationship is more likely to end than if a man has had a tryst and had a relationship. That type of thing. I know it's a stereotype, but I do find it anecdotally. It seems that if a woman crosses over, and obviously not all, but I've seen more so, that they lack the commitment.
Right.
A man just may be out and about, just doesn't quite see it the same way, isn't fully aware of the pain that they can cause. And that's not a justification. I'm saying it's what I have seen. But it somewhat depends on the person, how strongly they felt about the other person, the level of love they have, and the level of commitment and the desire. Some can never climb the mountain. If they can't really understand why it happened and the person really can't explain it, then if that mountain isn't climbed, then the best you're going to do, if you want to call keeping a marriage together, is it may be functional, but it's never going to be the same. But if the mountain can be climbed, why did it happen? How did it happen? Why did you do this? This type of thing, and the person really explains everything, and together they can determine how they're going to rush off into the sunset in a positive way.
Well, right, and as you said, unlike what took you down the road to maybe breaking up, is coming back from it. The soul searching is going to be there, and it had better be almost a 50-50 commitment there, because that's the only way you're going to get through to the other side. But today, the understanding of what the offended person is going through, what you have to give. If you're the opposite, you've got to give a lot here. You've got to expect time to go by, and it's not going to be easy. That's the bottom line. It is not going to be easy. Regional Psychological Services in East Lansing, the place to go online. It's the podcast at drjohnb.com. Our good friend, Dr. John Braccio. Always nice to talk to you, sir. Even on an unpleasant subject, trying to make the best. As he says, he's a positive guy. Take care.
We can focus on there are many successes, and let us encourage those.
Absolutely. We're back in a moment on the Morning Wake Up, 1320 WILS.